Sex workers of Reddit. Who was the grossest customer you've had? I had a client shit himself while I was blowing him, then got mad when I stopped blowing him. According to him, all men shit themselves while feeling extreme pleasure. Edit. You need to stop asking me if that's the professor. Definitely not, he was not old. And I'm based in Canada on a tiny little island. Edit. Yes. Blumpkin. I was a sex worker, escort for 2 years. I was hired by a 73-ish-year-old professor, nice-sized public university. He hired me to go to his office and give him blowjobs. Yes. It was on campus grounds. Anyway. I'm giving him head and I smelled something foul. I wanted to stop, and as soon as I was about to, I see a lump of shit lodged in between his ass cheeks. I didn't want to embarrass him but told him that I was ready to go. I never agreed to see him again. I'm not a sex worker. But I did run a bar opposite one of Edinburgh's infamous saunas, sort of legal brothel the police turned a blind eye to. Anyway, the girls used to come into my bar once their shift was over for a well-earned drink, and so I got to know some of them pretty well. Inevitably, conversation would turn to their clients' kinks. 2 spring to mind. The high court judge who came in to be spanked and be told he needed to be punished. Not that exciting. But the one I can never forget was the peanut butter man. He would come in the day before with a massive bag of peanuts for his favorite girl and book an appointment the next day where the girl would shit on him and he would smear it all over himself, saying I'm the peanut butter man over and over. I could never get that image out of my mind. Exotic dancer here. I watched a girl get on stage with a bottle of Heineken and put it into her vagina. Then do a handstand, effectively drinking it. She then stood back up and the beer went back into the bottle and someone paid her to drink it. I had a client who scraped the crotch of my panties with a knife, then put the scrapings in his pipe and smoked it. Why did I learn English? Person facepalming, light skin tone. My friend used to do this on the side cause you know extra cash. But she stopped when she had a guy pay her to peg him, and then as she was doing it, he shit himself and didn't want her to stop. He told her that it felt better with that kind of lube. She said she had to stop and gather herself and proceeded cause he was paying her $1,000 for the hour. But as she began again, that's when he began to jerk off and cum all over the bed underneath him. She said that room smelled so bad afterwards. She said as she was washing up and getting ready to leave, he was just laying on his cum and shit stained bed. Like she said, he's literally laying on his shit and cum and naked and pleased with himself. She says he wanted her to do it again as he was laying there. But this time he wanted to be on his back while they did it. She says I politely declined and told him I had to get to another appointment. A coworker's mother came in and paid another coworker to spank her. But the mom said she wanted to be able to hear it. I gave a lap dance to what I thought was a couple. They were brother and sister. I was a phone sex worker. The amount of men who wanted me to be a cold dead girl was a bit disturbing. This blew up after I went to bed. A few people have asked how I managed to do a dead girl over the phone. Basically, I described the state of my corpse and they detailed how they wanted to abuse me. In answer to another frequent question, I'm not sure phone sex work exists anymore, as I did this in the early 2000s before FaceTime and OnlyFans existed. Before I went independent, I worked for a service. They sent me out on a call, and when I got to the apartment I had to be buzzed in. I opened the door and it's a large loft-style apartment and there are piles of trash everywhere. I'm standing in the doorway thinking oh shit, and I hear a voice from up in the loft telling me to come around and up the stairs. So I do. Doing my best to avoid touching anything, and I climb the stairs and the entire loft area is a king-size bed. Trash all around the bed and a massive obese man laying in the bed. Fortunately, it was incredibly quick. But I told the service I never wanted to go back. Edit. Wow. This blew up overnight. To answer some questions. Yes, I went through with it. How did I get through it? Environment aside, he was actually really sweet. We chatted for about 30 minutes before he asked for oral. He finished within 2 to 3 minutes. Also, I've always been really good at disappearing in my head. At the time, it never occurred to me that I could say no. It was at the very beginning, and at that time I had a hard time saying no to begin with. I'd say he was more like Dale the Whale but younger. My brother once was the maintenance guy in a brothel in Switzerland. One morning a guy came in and asked if the used condoms from the night before were still available. He wanted to buy, open and eat them. Every time I think about that story it makes my mind crawl. I eat Oreos before I got to the dentist because I think the dental assistant is hot and I want her to spend more time with me. I did bottle service at a strip club for a while. This is a story from a bar back I was friends with. He was working at another club prior and was friends with a stripper who had some wealthy regular customer that would pay her to pee in a glass and he would drink it. She couldn't pee that night so asked the bar back to pee in the cup for her. He did and the customer sat and drank it. I'm a webcam model and the amount of grown-ass men fantasizing about their underage nieces, neighbors or sisters is disturbing. I always block them. I rather be poor than engage on their disturbing fantasies. Not me. Someone I know creates content. Feet pics. Got paid $3,000 each for 2 photos. One of lacy undies on the floor around her bare feet like she dropped them. Other photo of her having taken a dump in the undies. Dropped them. And then stood in it. She figured $6,000 for 2 photos that don't show her face isn't too bad. I have a friend who was a pro dome in a dungeon in NYC for a few years and she had a regular client who was an FBI agent. He was into mummification and would come in once a month to be bound in a body bag for 48 hours at a time. This was on a date, but I had this guy. My friends and my therapist call him Poop Ryan. So you know where this is going. He and I got intimate one night and he begged me to pee on him. At this point, I was decently intoxicated and figured, it's his apartment and I never have to see him again. Why the fuck not? So I agree. Well, he laid down on his floor and I stood over him. He said, no, up here, and pointed to his face. So, I was like, okay, I can pee on his face if he wants and I move. Well, he opens his mouth and I step away and go, whoa no. I'm not doing that. He begged me to pee into his mouth so he could drink it. So, I figured, c'est la vie, right? I squat over him and start to pee into his mouth. And he's drinking away. At one point he tells me to stop. So I do and I'm holding it and he gets up and leaves. He comes back with a glass from the kitchen. He asked me to pee into the glass so he could enjoy it later. So, I pissed in the glass and watched him drink my urine from a pint glass. It was at this point I was very sober and decided, well, that's enough dating for this century, and got ready to go when he begged me to take a shit on his chest and then fuck him without him cleaning it off. So I got in my car. Watch him run out after me. Drove away. Blocked his number. And never looked back. I kind of have to take a shit. I'm seriously wondering if I should go to the bathroom. Or put an ad online and see if I can make a quick $3,000. Not gross, but I did have a guy that wanted to cut off my leg. I wasn't a sex worker, but as a taxi driver, I had many regulars amongst the sex trade. They all had the same character they point blank refused to entertain. He didn't believe in washing either himself or his clothes. Reckoned it weakened a person. I was lucky enough to only have met him in the open air, but my nose was still traumatized. He was really miffed because none of the ladies would entertain him, and then I refused to take him in the car. Lol, no amount of money would have been worth that. What's with all the men coming and shitting themselves at the same time? WTF. Edit. Great. Now my top most upvoted comment of all time is about shit and cum LMAO. My aunt's best friend was an escort in the late 90s. One day she calls my aunt sounding upset and proceeds to tell her that the customer she just had wanted her to wear his daughter's clothing and speak like his daughter. The grossest part? The daughter was 2. FYI, I checked out at Peanut Butter Man. Not me, but a friend who escorts had a guy really into shaming. He would go through her trash can to find used condoms of other clients and start chewing on them. And he wanted her to start yelling at him and beating him for doing that, while he was on his knees still chewing on the used condoms. Actual escort here. I've been doing it on and off for the past decade, starting at 20 I'm 31 now, and have never had a client with poor hygiene. I have always charged $600 per hour. The grossest client I have ever had. Well, it wasn't by any fault of his own. He was so massively unattractive. And he had these huge moles all over his face. Also, he was clearly very insecure and it seemed like he was prepared for me to reject him. I still feel awful about this encounter. Even though it happened maybe 8 years ago. He seemed direct as far as what he wanted. He asked me to give him a massage, and so I massaged him for several minutes and then he said, "This isn't working out." Loudly crying, he paid me in full. But I felt awful about it. Thanks for reminding me how normal I am, Reddit. There are entirely too many poop and pedophilia stories in these comments. Nauseated face. This thread is making me second guess my no kink shaming stance. Some people should definitely be shamed. Definitely the one that had head cheese after he washed. Second is the one, multiple sadly, with dingleberries. I've had them piss themselves. I've had them shit themselves. I've had them puke and whatnots. All just fine. Rancid, but I can deal with that. The ones with dingleberries were the most disgusting. Usually high-placed jobs like CEO of a Fortune 500 etc. Not a clue when it comes to washing your butt. Let alone be aware of the clumps of literal shit that hang there because they don't wash properly and they don't even care. The absolute worst was the head cheese expecting me to suck him off. After he supposedly washed properly. Nope, 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 nope. I gagged visibly and audibly. Lectured him about washing under the skin and kicked him out. I couldn't even look at it without gagging. I read the title as, "Who was the greatest customer you ever had?" and was so fucking confused reading these replies. When I was working under a service, I got called to meet with an older man in his 70s, regular to the service, that wants to take some extreme photos and receive a BJ to completion. When I got to his place, he walked me to a room with a life-size crucifix and a noose hung on the ceiling that can be lowered and raised. First set of photos. I slipped my wrists through metal hoops of the crucifix. Second set of photos, I was on tippy toes with the noose, loose-ish, around my neck. I was told to act dead. Expressionless. Limp. After the photos we set up for the BJ and his dick was too low for when I'm on my knees. So he found a crate to stand on. As I was blowing him, I noticed stabbing pain on my thighs but pushed through because he was already coming. Didn't take long. I looked down and it was his gross long-ass yellow and black toenails that were stabbing my thighs. Literally dry heaving thinking about it, face vomiting. Edit. I was told about the crucifix and noose beforehand. Other girls also have gone before with no issues. When I got there and saw that the guy is really old and moves slow, I did not feel threatened or afraid. And I made sure to be observant of him the whole time for signs of aggression. But apart from the death-related fetishes, he was quite meek. After the ordeal we shared a joint and talked for a bit. Knowing I will not be returning, I asked him how he developed his fetish with the nooses and crucifixes. He said matter-of-factly that it all started with being physically abused by his mother as a child and witnessing his mother killing herself via hanging. I was very surprised and appreciative of his honesty. Definitely one of the more eye-opening, disturbing experiences I've had in SW. Used to work as a professional dominatrix. Had a client who brought a pet egg to a session and then ate my foot shavings. Had another client who brought yogurt to the session and paid me to watch him fuck the little Yoplait cup. The smell was atrocious. And of course, there are the many clients who never adequately prepared for a pegging. I honestly can't choose. Update. The Yoplait fucker was a Brooklyn Hasidic Jewish man. So if you choose to visualize it for some reason, make sure to include the pios, ringlets, swinging back and forth. The grated Parmesan foot cheese guy poured the contents of the pet egg, which also included my friend's foot Parmesan, straight into his mouth. I think that I grated up some more for him to take home and instructed him to actually pour it over spaghetti. Wait. Was that low-key cannibalism? LMAO. Update number 2. Just unlocked a repressed part of the Yoplait memory. He ate the yogurt after fucking it. I got confirmation from another Dome friend who's seen him fucking and eating the yogurt is his thing. He's notorious in Brooklyn. What I've learned so far. Men have loose assholes. Hide your nieces. One of my roommates was an escort. Tall. Blonde. Tattooed. Gorgeous. She talked about needing to establish a lot of boundaries right away. List of don'ts. She talked about not kissing on the mouth or cuddling. She said it costs $1,000 and most men only last 15 minutes. She had a goal to save up and finish this career at 30. Then transitioned to something else. She did a lot of stripping that started as dancing but eventually moved into sex. She said every bachelor party she's ever done, the husband has cheated on his wife. She seemed quite hardened and kept saying, men are all the same. From the outside it seemed like a scary job. Lots of encounters. Lots of unknowns. A friend of mine used to work at a brothel. She told me about a client, late 40s to mid-50s, who wanted her to wear his actual daughter's clothes and do some father-daughter age and incest play. He claimed it was the only way to satisfy his urges without doing something despicable. His daughter was 14 and he was bringing in her actual clothing. Apparently he was a regular and would call ahead looking for young petite workers who were up for the extreme age play. My friend said she saw him once and was pretty creeped out by the experience, so declined him on further visits. She also said that as far as weird clients go, he was an ideal punter at face value. He was upfront about what he wanted. Never pushed any of the girls' limits and paid whatever they demanded. Which unfortunately was not the standard behavior for every John. She did say that it was the most creepy client she had though. I used to be a SW, then ended up with a pimp. So I didn't really get a choice in who I accepted. One kinda gross but not the worst was an older trick who was a regular. He would not wear his dentures and try to suck on my boob multiple times. And just thinking about it gives me the creeps. Another trick was so insistent that I shit on him. We had plans to meet, but I had to keep blowing him off because I was heavy into opiate addiction and constipated. When I finally met with him, it took me about 15 minutes to get it all out and he paid me $2,500. Didn't have to do anything sexual to him. Just shit on him. Edited. Changed P to pimp. Also ETA, since a lot of people are asking how much money I kept. The answer is none. He would take my money. Give me drugs, as long as I was working or made the quota for the day. If I didn't want to work he would take the drugs. Until I was so dope sick that I would take more tricks. Just to be not dope sick. Make sure I had a hotel room. Make sure I had food. Drive me to calls. Run my phone. And if shit hit the fan, come and protect me. It's not something that I would have done if I wasn't suffering an addiction to multiple substances. But at the time it was relatively easy. And I didn't really care about living at that point. Pimps tend to be very manipulative. And will isolate you. So that you are fully dependent on them. I often worked at least 5 hours driving from the city I was living. I was homeless but had places to stay in. So I couldn't decide to just cut. If I got sick of it. Seems everyone here had a roommate. I'm not a sex worker. But my best friend is a stripper and the story's not gross in a physically nauseating sense. But just from the guy's attitude. One time when we were hanging out she got a text from one of her dancer friends. Keep in mind the club has very explicit signs saying that the dancers are not prostitutes and they both will not and cannot legally have sex with customers. They just had a customer who paid for a champagne room while back there he says something to the effect of I want you to blow me. Then I want to eat you out. Then I want to come inside you. She thought he was joking and kind of laughed it off. About halfway through the dance he tries to unzip his pants. Then when she stopped him he gets all pissed off. First he tells her she has to do it because he paid. When she continues to tell him no he tries to start negotiating with her and says at least let me come inside you. After being told no again he starts demanding his money back because he wouldn't have paid for a dance if he knew she wasn't going to fuck him. She told him good luck with that but he's not going to get it back. Men wanting to smell sweaty ass and watch me shit. I'm a phone sex worker so this is all fantasy. Browsing this thread in fear that I'll be here because when I was financially stable, I hired a ton of sex workers for cuddling. As much as I miss getting laid, I miss being held more. I've discovered that I am still broken but at least I'm not gross. Yay. The bar is 1 inch off the ground. This is more just an interesting story. But my mom used to be a prostitute in the 1970s. She worked at a massage parlor where she says she was the queen of hand jobs. She just turned 70 this year. Anyway, she said one of her regular customers would bring hydrogen peroxide to their weekly appointment, and he would first pour hydrogen peroxide all over her private parts. Then pour hydrogen peroxide in his mouth. Swish. Spit it out. Then, he'd go down on her for an hour. When they were finished, He'd swish his mouth with more hydrogen peroxide and be on his way. Definitely not her grossest client. But I always found this story to be interesting. My ex used to do cam shows. There was one super creep that offered her $175,000 to cut off one of her breasts. Dude still hasn't fucking paid. Seriously. Though. More than once. She was offered money to cut here or otherwise mutilate her body. Some people are really fucked in the head. Not a sex worker myself, but heard this from friend who was. There is a well-known lawyer in our town who has had commercials for his office on longer than I've been alive. He shows himself in a grand, beautiful office with gold-colored decorations and a gigantic portrait of his wife. But my friend and every other sex worker in town have all said, you would be shocked by what the people in this town are into. Every single one of them has used this guy as the weirdest example. He has a glass table in his office and pays prostitutes to crap on it while lays underneath and watches them do it. It's not harmful or anything. Just really gross. One day, for my college newspaper, I had the interview this man in his office and saw the glass table where it happens. Fortunately, I withheld the vomit in my mouth. The amount of stories about clients with pedophilia fantasies is insane. This has to be one of darkest askReddit threads I've seen. Are there really that many closet pedophiles? I spoke to a swir once who had a client in Hawaii. A married man with kids. The swir lives in Texas. He wanted her to film herself shitting. Then proceed to mail the shit from Texas to Hawaii, where he planned on eating her shit on camera. Needless to say, she absolutely refused. She did say she was considering sending him dog shit in place of her own. I once had a member of the New York Philharmonic play his flute, while pleasuring my pussy with the other side. You know, I'm honestly really happy to call mine tame in comparison to this. I used to be an exotic dancer. I was very strict about my rules of no touching, licking, sex, etc. Nothing against those that allow it, but I had a guy who was super drunk. Had been through 2 other dancers who both reported the dude being extremely rude. Not taking no for an answer. Trying to have sex. I needed money that week and it was a $250 risk to hope I could convince this guy to be nice. I was wrong. He was super aggressive. Tried to force it, so I shouted to anyone nearby and the security kicked him out. But made sure that guy paid me double. We also had an older dude who regularly came in and just wanted a girl to get really sweaty during a stage set. Then come and sit on his lap so he could smell her armpits. I shameless took the $40 for 2 minutes. Also plenty of the same that others had. Guys would offer extra money to have me act like their daughters, nieces, granddaughters, etc. I always refused. A really sad one was a guy whose wife wouldn't have sex with him anymore because he was too old. So he showed me videos of her and asked if I'd act like her during the dance and pretend I loved him. My favorite customers were the ones who just wanted naked therapy. I loved talking to people about their problems. And getting paid to do it while naked was just easy money. So I, 29M, used to essentially prostitute myself for meth. Meth is the ultimate sex drug. And lowers your inhibitions to ground floor plus ramps up the kinky meter beyond what you can imagine if you've never experienced it. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the sex while I was high like that. But the thing I was really after was the meth and the sex was just a bonus. It's called party and play, which is gay code for doing a bunch of meth, and often GHB with it, and having sex for literally days on end. It's a disgusting and degrading scene to be involved in. And on more than one occasion I found myself in extremely dangerous situations. But the worst experience I ever had was with this guy Lee. Him and I had actually bonded. And he became my daddy dom. I was 25 and he was 50. And the sex was phenomenal. Anyways, I had to go to prison for a year. We kept in touch the whole time. And he even put money on my books on quite a few occasions. I was actually starting to become interested in him. So to celebrate me getting out, he took me to this nice cabin out in a state park. We did a bunch of meth. And fucked for like 3 days straight. But it was during this extended stay he showed his true colors. He gives me his laptop and asks me to pick out a porn that was on a flash drive. I look at the screen. And the list of file names disgusted me. I can only remember a part of one of the titles. but it read 3-year-old gets fucked by. My jaw was agape. And he noticed immediately. Took the laptop from me. And gave me a hurried excuse that his friend had left that flash drive. And he didn't mean to bring it. And that he had thought he destroyed it, but he must have mixed them up. Eye roll. But what he was really doing was seeing if I was into it. He was testing the waters to see if I was into it. 2. That was on day 1 of our 3-day trip. The rest of the time there I had sex with him. But only because I felt obligated to. Plus the meth made me want it still. Which disgusts me. Then he tried to gaslight me. Since I was fresh out of prison he had told me he'd take me clothes shopping. Well, we never got to that. But on our last day there I noticed 3 folded up shirts sitting on top of my book bag. Which was in plain view on the couch. I look at him. Point to the shirts then to myself. And he nodded and said yeah. So I tried them all on. And not one fit. They were all way too small. I realize now that they were really just his shirts he was trying to pass off. I thought it was a nice gesture anyways. So I folded them back up and planned on keeping them regardless. I placed them right back where I found them. On top of my book bag. About 3 hours later we're getting ready to head out and go stargazing. When I go to my book bag the shirts are gone. So I asked him where they went. And he goes, "What are you talking about?" So I repeated myself and said I had just tried on those shirts. "Where'd they go?" And he replies with, "That never happened." And I'm like, "What do you mean that didn't happen? You were right in the fucking kitchen watching me try them on." And he insists again that never happened. Immediately I got pissed. The word gaslight immediately popped into my head as I realized that was what he was trying to do to me. Something I've seen amongst a lot of tweakers is they avoid direct confrontation. They won't tell you what's bothering them when you ask. In fact, they'll emphatically deny there's any sort of problem. Instead, they'll mutter things or do little signals to catch your attention. Meth makes my toes twitch. They'll wiggle non-stop against my will. And this bothers a lot of tweakers. It makes them anxious for some reason. So while I was twitching, Lee would sniff with his nose. I'd stop wiggling my toes. Everything's fine. But once they start wiggling, which they'll always do once I stop focusing on stopping them, he would sniff. Then if it didn't stop he would sniff again. I played this little back and forth game with him over and over again just to confirm I'm not crazy. He would sniff any time I was moving around too much. So anyways we finally get to the stargazing field. And at this point I'm pissed. The passive-aggressive signaling bullshit combined with the attempted gaslighting really got me boiling. So we're sitting in the field. And the stars are beautiful but I can't enjoy them because I'm too preoccupied being passive-aggressive myself now by shuffling dramatically in my seat non-stop. And, just as expected he would pull the same shit. Eventually I got up, boiling with rage, and said, "Fuck this. We're leaving." Picked up my chair and walked back to the car. I sat at that car for about an hour before he finally came to check on me. He starts with, "What's wrong? Hun, just talk to me." We get in the car and he keeps trying to press me to tell him what's wrong and I fucking snapped. I told him he's lost his right to speak. And that's he taking me home this instant. We start driving the almost 2 hours back to where I was staying. And the whole time I was the biggest asshole. I was moving around in my seat real obnoxiously. And sniffing really loudly and dramatically. At one point I pulled up the Wikipedia article on gaslighting and read it to him word for word. Making snide comments like, "Oh look. You tried to do that one." He tried talking me down. And I asked, "Can you even admit to the fucked up shit you're doing?" He immediately shut up and dead eye stared at the road. We get the apartment building I'm staying at. And as he parks to let me out I pulled on my big boy britches and go, "Now you're going to give me all the ice in your pocket. Your bubble. And your cigarettes or else I'm going to beat the fuck out of you." He just handed them over without a word. I went inside. Smoked his shit. And never talked to him again. And wow, if you made it this far I'm impressed. I didn't mean to write a novel but once I got going it was nice to vent it all out. A client that I really liked once sharded on a white hotel bedspread. I almost cried. I had to wash the doona in that one spot and flip it and sandwich a towel on the bottom and a top sheet with a towel underneath. Not enough money in the world for that one. I had a man make remarks during a lap dance about me being a good 16-year-old slut. I was of age obviously, because that's what he was into I guess. Ended the dance promptly. This was years ago and it still bothers me. Edit to add. The amount of men who comment on me looking like their nieces, stepdaughters, etc. during lap dances with me makes me want to blow up the planet. Edit the second. Here's a lightly more light-hearted one I remembered. A customer came in one night looking to lick out a dancer's belly button. I declined as I really can't imagine how uncomfortable that'd be. Lol. Unfortunately, I'm unsure if he ever found a belly button to fellatiate. Almost all the men I suck and get face-fucked by are old. Messy. Some of them are straight-up hermits who never clean up, and servicing them is the most unsanitary shit I've ever done. Lol. But the one who made me feel the worst was definitely the guy who got me high without my consent and didn't tell me he was HIV positive and came in my throat. Made me swallow too. I was drunk at the time, which didn't help. I got tested and I'm negative. Apparently he was undetectable, but the fact that he didn't tell me, and that he basically drugged me, was gross as hell. Edit. Since someone asked. The way I found out was that I asked him if he was negative before we met, and he was shifty about it. Said stuff like, yeah, you won't catch anything from me, so I asked him again after meeting when I was sober. Which is when he said, oh yeah, I'm undetectable. Not trying to stigmatize, but it should be made clear before meeting. Also, thanks to everyone for your kind words. I'm usually careful, but being drunk plus self-destructive streak has led to some shady situations. All y'all stay safe too. Grin. I'm really new to SW. Only a couple months in. I'm a small girl. And the amount of people that want me to be with someone massive and me being super submissive and childish throws me off. I had this really awful customer once who was really into the 1991 drama film, Boys N the Hood. His kink was the scene where Ricky got shot in the alleyway. Me and a handful of escorts met said customer at his Beverly Hills mansion one day, and he made us watch the scene on repeat. He handed us all scripts with the parts included. He gave us this whole seminar about how we were going to recreate the scene and film it for his private collection. It got out of control. He was very adamant about being Ricky, even though he was a middle-aged overweight white tech millionaire. After a month or so of rehearsing, we showed the scene. I played Ricky's mother, and I had to do a lot of screaming and crying. He built this big alleyway set in between the guest houses on his lush property and decided to film there. He even got his friend down in Hollywood to provide special effects squibs for the shot. Fake blood and all. He was in full blackface. White long sleeve and tan pants just like Ricky. He ran down that alleyway set and got blasted by one of the escorts. My other sex worker colleague dragged him into the living room set, and I did a beat-for-beat recreation of Ricky's mother screaming. He laid there, lifeless on the couch, and then made some improv adjustments to the script. He pulled his fake blood-stained pants down and proceeded to pleasure himself while he made us scream and cry over his death. It was so surreal. And it was pretty crazy to see him on the news a few years later standing next to Bill Gates at some big fancy dinner. I was in need of cash about a decade later and ended up at his mansion again. Looking at his shelf of old VHS tapes. There was one which read, Crenshaw, on the spine. I'm not sure if it was the recording or not. But I think about it all the time. The second time wasn't as bad. He just made me spot him while he hanged himself for 20 seconds at a time while he was dressed as Danny Zuko from Grease. Cop got off to hearing me say I was molested. Man, this thread feels dark. Like a B thread at 3 a.m. Not a sex worker, but in my early 20s I let people take porn photos of me, and my partner would take photos of me having sex with them. We were very young. Deep in debt, were swingers at the time too, so it was just getting paid for what we did anyway. I was quite selective who I saw, but I got photos of this guy and he looked fine, so we went round, and he didn't look much like his photos, and he explained he'd had weight loss surgery and lost a lot of weight. He had gone from probably 30 stone to about 12, and he was just a mass of empty, loose, wrinkly skin. I didn't want to hurt his feelings because he was a really nice guy, and I needed the 300 pounds. So I did what I needed to and left, and when he kept emailing to ask me to go again, I felt so bad. He was even offering extra, but I just couldn't do it. That was one of the last times I did it though, because I got a better job. Probably one of the best nights I've ever had. This guy wasn't having the best hygiene routine. But he was a bit of a legend, and he didn't want sex. He just knew he was going to be alone for New Year's Day, so he hired me to watch the fireworks on TV with him. And we had homemade weed. Cookies and weed brownies, and I drink vodka, and he paid me 200 pounds. He literally just wanted someone to spend the night with. No sex. I thought a femdom customer of mine was into latex puppy, mistress play. But nope, turns out he meant a real dog. Guy wanted me to roleplay as his daughter on OnlyFans. First of all, no. Second of all, that's against their TOS. I don't mind mommy, daddy kink. But to be specific about wanting to roleplay an incestuous relationship is fucking gross and creepy, and I feel bad for his daughter. I was hoping to come here and read weird kinks, and all I got was a disturbing realization that there are a lot of pedos out there. Not a worker or anything like that. But I had a friend I knew who liked to drink and knew that I did not drink. So when he wanted to go and drink, but not drive, he would give me a call to hang out. Which I didn't mind doing because we always had fun. One day he calls me and tells me that his cousin from Armenia is visiting and he really wants to go to a strip club. Not really my cup of tea. But I thought it was a good idea to be there, as I didn't want him or his cousin to drive while drunk or make any dumb decisions while under the influence. So I go and pick them up, and the cousin does not speak a word of English. Not even hello or the most basic stuff. We get to the club and we're sitting at a table and they are drinking away and we're chatting and having a pretty good time, considering I don't like strip clubs. My friend tells his cousin for $5 he can go on stage and get a quick 30-second private dance from a dancer, or $40 to go to a private room for a whole song. Or something to that extent. I don't remember the actual prices, as this was like 20 years ago. So the cousin goes to the stage and lays down with a $5 bill in his mouth, and the girl starts to dance over top of him. She gets on top of him and says something to him. I found out later that his shirt had a word on it that was the same as her name apparently, and she was saying something like, "Hey, your shirt has my name on it." Well, not knowing English, he decides that she was encouraging him or something, and he proceeds to grope her chest and hold her tight to him as he humps her pretty much. I start screaming for him to stop, and so does my friend. But before we could even take one step towards the stage, two bouncers grab his one arm and one leg and rip him off the stage. The girl goes running off into the back room, obviously very upset. I explained to him that we told him to act politely and respectfully, and he doesn't understand English, and we are so sorry. As they have him off the ground up against the wall by his neck. They demand we pay up, and I give them the $40 I had on me. The cousin gives like $200 and my friend gives like $100, and we get tossed from the club. I am super pissed off because that could have ended a hell of a lot worse than what happened. The cousin is laughing and my friend says that he is happy because he now has a story to tell for when he goes back home. I was disgusted. The next day at like midnight I get a call from a number I don't know. This was before spam and scam calls were common, so I answer it. It is my friend. He and his cousin need me to pick them up. I was still pissed off and told him to tell his cousin to fuck off. He says he would, but his cousin is in another room. I told him to go there and tell him that. And I will get them. He said he can't because he doesn't know what room he is in. I was confused until he said, "We're at the hospital in London. Not England. And is a city about an hour from where I live." Apparently they went there to meet up with another family member. Went to another strip club. The bouncer from the first club we all went to was also at that club. The cousin tried to grope another dancer, and the cousin and my friend got the shit kicked out of them so badly that they ended up hospitalized. They lost the keys to the car, their wallet, etc. Their clothing was torn off of them and they were beaten really badly. So all in all they got beaten extremely badly. Their car had to be towed, which was like $300. They had to get all new IDs. Including the cousin, who had to go to the Armenian embassy to get a new passport. Lost like $500 in cash between them all. Plus watches and jewelry, and had to be driven home by me in the middle of the night wearing these like plastic pants and shirts the hospital gave them. I asked the cousin if he wanted to tell this story too, and I assume the translated response was a whole bunch of swear words. Apparently he was under lockdown the rest of his visit and couldn't go anywhere without my friend's mom escorting him. Which pretty much meant he could go to church with them on Wednesdays and Sundays, and that was it for the rest of his trip. When I was a sex worker, it was genuinely alarming how many men wanted me to act like a child and dress in a school uniform as part of a session. I always point blank refused, but it made me feel sick to my stomach. As for actually gross clients, there was one guy who was gearing up for ages to hire me to have a fairly vanilla session with him, and went back and forth on it for ages. He said he had been with another guy before, but from his conversations I had my doubts. When he finally set up a time to meet with me and I got to his place, I was literally bombarded with the most egregious rancid odor known to man. He answered the door and his place was dirtier than anything I'd ever seen before. Trash all over the floor. Bins piled high with rotting food scraps. He took me to the bedroom where he had cleared a spot on the bed that was barely enough space to sit on, never mind fuck on, and unzipped his pants. This then introduced me to what can only be described as how I imagine a sulfur mine smells. His dick was basically caked in smegma and the scent of acrid urine. I didn't even touch it or get any closer. I literally stood up and walked past him and out of his place without saying a word. No amount of money is worth it to get down and dirty in a place that should be condemned. Not a sex worker. I had a friend who was a professional dominatrix in NY. She told me men with big dicks often wanted to be shamed and mocked for having small penises. Also, strange thing. At the university I went to, it was common for men to approach female students if they could take us shopping for designer shoes. Pay us, then take pictures of our feet. And let us keep the shoes. They would swear this was all that they wanted to do. Nothing else. I never went along at BC. That sounded creepy and unsafe to go along with. Sex worker. Friend of a friend. Man would buy her super expensive jeans and they would walk around the block holding hands while she pooed herself in them. I think it is fake news. Unless you are sick, how do you poop yourself while walking? That's not easy. Anyway, in addition to the jeans, she would get $350. This was in the early 2000s. Edit. She got to keep the jeans, and if memory serves me, she did. This was early 2000s. $150 plus jeans were shocking back then. Laxatives never occurred to me. This dude had an overall gross vibe. Slobbery, uncommunicative. Had to give himself a penis injection to get it up. Wanted gross details of my work experiences. Thought he was a great lover, but he just had deep pockets. A close second was gross because he was overly familiar and tried to insinuate himself into my circle of friends and then tried to act dumb when I spoke to it. Not really gross. But a guy told me to marry him about 10 different times. I work as a chat girl, so basically he paid to talk to 10 girls. Talked to them about a day each and then asked each of them for their hand in marriage. What a weird guy. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.